So, what was it like growing up with Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez, hanging out at the Martin Sheen household, and meeting Tom Cruise and having him affect my life forever? Well, my son started asking me some of these questions, and I started looking back. And if you want some of these answers and some untold stories, stick around, and let's get to it. Let's get to it. Like I said, my son had me looking back and looking back at my past, and I come across this picture which I didn't even know existed, and this really brought back a lot of memories. Really kind of triggering. I'm in the blue here. This isn't the whole picture, but these are my two best friends growing up in Malibu, and to the right of him is of course Charlie Estevez. Before he was Charlie Sheen, and he was my baseball dude, man. He was my best friend through high school. But this brought back a lot of memories, and so I want to get to the slide and kind of present those. We'll talk about that. Let me bring that up. Okay, so this is one of the four slides that I was telling you about. I've got four with the 12 people that were really influential and pivotal in my life, and this first four were, of course, Charlie, Emilio, Tom Cruise, and Martin Sheen. If you see an asterisk on these slides, it means I met them, I knew them, I was part of their life in some form or fashion, and I have a quote under each one of these, and this quote is pretty much how to me best describes them. And when I came across the quote for Tom, I was shocked. I'll have to explain that when I talk about Tom and what happened there. So let's go ahead and start. I will start with Charlie. What I want to do is just kind of go through these 12, just kind of give you a preview. The idea is I'm going to make a video on each one of these and how they changed my life, and give you some stories maybe you never heard before, and so we're just going to give a general overview, just kind of like a preview of each one of these. So Charlie, what can I say about Charlie? So I guess the real question is, what can't you say about Charlie? But like I said, we met on the ball field, and he invited me over to his house, and I got to meet his family, his brother Emilio, and brother Ramon, his sister Renee, Martin, and Janet, and we went in his backyard, and sure enough, and not only did he have $1 million pool back there, which is pretty spectacular, he had a jugs machine that was netted like a pro, and so we literally hit it off, and it was the start of our friendship, and we became really good friends. We played lots of ball together. In fact, here I'll share this. This is my father used to keep the stats of. This was when we were 1981. This was our all-star team. As you can see, Dean Cain's on there, and his brother Roger Cain, and of course Charlie's on there, and Gina Satriano. She was a girl who was fantastic. She was really good. Her father played for the Angels, but you can take a look at those stats, and you can see who the best ball player is there. That would be me up top. But and just kidding. No, not really. But we had a good time playing ball, and so through Charlie, I got to. Well, there would be a lot of stories. We'll talk about. High school. We'll talk about some of the adventures that we went on. There's a few that never been talked about. There's a credit card thing that was. There's a lot more to that story actually, but we'll get into that. I think it's where his betting started. He was losing to a guy betting baseball games every weekend, and turns out he was a computer guy, and he was like, "How are you beating me?" And like 120 a week, and. Found out he was writing programs and sticking all the stats of all the baseball teams and saying play the game, and so he was beating Charlie and drove Charlie crazy, and he opened up to about the things he did, and that is a story. Let me tell you, it goes a lot further than what has ever been told. But it's a good one, but there's more. But Emilio, a life changer for me in a lot of ways. One, he's just a hell of a guy. He was the de facto leader of everyone that was there. To give you little how the house worked. Everyone was at Martin's house, and me and Charlie were good friends, and of course Chris was over there a lot, and we're all the same age. And then there was Rob, who was kind of like a tweener. He was in between me and Charlie and Emilio. Emilio's a little bit older, and so he would float between the two and hang out. A lot of times with me and Charlie, and we'd play baseball. What we called tennis ball baseball with his brother Chad. There was a abandoned school right below his house, a few blocks, and we developed this game, and we played it all the time, and it was a lot of fun. But with Emilio, he had a premiere. His first movie, it was called 40 Days for Danny. It was later changed to In the Custody of Strangers. And I went with him, Charlie, Rob, and Tom Cruise. That was the time when Tom Cruise was staying over at his house. They were filming Outsiders. And I'll never forget, Rob was getting an interview with Entertainment Tonight. You can see the lights down there in the lobby. And Tom flipped up the back of his collar and his jacket. So watch this. I'm going to go bum a cigarette off him in the middle of his interview, and that's what this shot is you'll see the collar backed up. But so I met someone there while they were all doing their. Eventually, Amelia went over there and they were giving a interview on their the Outsiders, the touchstone of that generation. That movie, boy, that really made a lot of them. And so something happened that night that kind of changed me, and not necessarily because of Emilio. It was somebody else, but that'll be what we talk about there. And then Tom, that quote, the reason that doesn't define him in my way of thinking, but I will tell you, there's some weird synchronicities between me and Tom in that time period that I did not realize. So Tom was staying over at their place, Martin's house, and how we met. I wasn't friends with him or anything, but he changed my life forever. If anyone impacted my life in this first set of slides, it was him. Chris Penn wanted to letter in baseball, and or I'm sorry, he just wanted a letter. Period. Me and Charlie were playing baseball, and so we had our letters. And we used to kid Chris that when a part of a truck driver comes up, he'll be the next lead role on that, because he was kind of a big guy, and he was a great guy. He was kind of eccentric in a crazy fun kind of way. We used to skip school and hang out, but he was trying to get into wrestling, and I guess Tom was a wrestler. I did not know this. I learned a lot in the last couple of weeks that was very interesting. But that night changed my world forever. And again, the synchronicities you'll see that are very interesting, we'll cover there. And then of course Martin, quite honestly, is the most beautiful human being I've ever met in my life. I have never met anyone as gracious as him, and I really believe that quote is him. I sincerely believe he says that everything is grace, and the things that I saw and how he treated people, how he handled difficult events in the family's lives, and just unbelievable. I learned so much. He was really kind of a father figure to me. I remember he thought I was going the wrong way at one point, and we stayed up till 3:30 in the morning, and Janet comes out and would you please keep quiet? I got to get some sleep. So I can't say enough about that man. Not only does he have a phenomenal and stellar acting career, but just as a human being, he's something special. And I got to say that the bond that Emilio and him have is as a father-son is got to be the best father-son I have ever seen. Just their love for one another is really touching. So next, I want to talk about the turning the page. But before we do, I want to share two things. One is I obviously have a vision and something I want to do with this channel, and I would like to get a lot of views clearly, so that I can express some of the things we're going to see in the next slide. So to do that, I'm gonna put a teaser out. I have a picture that I've held on for 40 years. It's a picture of Charlie Sheen's first. Now I'll let you marinate on what that might possibly be. But I'll tell you, if you see it and you don't smile, you're not a human being. But if I can get a certain number of subscribers, I will post that never before seen photo of Charlie Sheen's first. And from what I saw, I was looking. I saw one picture. This one's a lot better. But if I can get a certain amount of subscribers, we'll go ahead and do that. So the second thing I wanted to share, and I never shared this with any of my friends growing up, not Charlie, not Rob, not Emilio, Nick, nobody. I shared this, and I just want to do this because it'll add context when we turn the page. But at that point in my life, when I was 16, I literally effectively lost my father. I lost my mother emotionally, and we lost our home. I lost everything within the home. I lost my car, which caused me to lose my job. And of course, the story with Tom, you'll see that I lost a great deal there. My hopes and dreams, I lost. And this is the time when all of my friends were really going supernova. They were taking off in their careers, and so I had the hat trick plus a couple bonus points. Man, there was a thing called latchkey kids. Man, I didn't have a latch or a key, but I don't know if it was pride or shame, whatever. But I was always hanging at the house. I never let them know. I went to school. I pretended like everything was fine, and So I was clearly searching at this point. So when we turn the page here. On the next slide, I'll go ahead and bring that up now. That's where we get into a whole different realm. So stick with me and let's turn the page. So clearly, in that context, my life, I'm searching for meaning. I'm like, what the hell is going on? What is this all about? Something about me when I was younger, about 9 years old. I'll post a picture. This is me when I was around 9. My parents went through transcendental meditation, and I went through TM as well with them. And kind of crazy. Learning meditation. I got my mantra, it was ing of all things. It's like, whatever, you're supposed to say this over and over again. But I did finally understand what meditation was, is to increase the spaces in between the thoughts and really kind of slow your mind down. But I was searching, so I had an Eastern slant, I guess is where I'm going with that. So I wasn't brought up in any church or anything. So I was looking at Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. I mean, you name it. I was going through them all. And if you really look at it, it really gets down to it's all this. Raising your consciousness through sexuality. I mean, I'll bring the receipts if you don't believe me. It really goes back to the Magi and going way back in ancient times. But literally, like every religion, that's what their thing is. I mean, of course, there's peripheral things around them, but that's really kind of the basis. And if you want to be honest, that's what it goes back to the very, very, very beginning. So I'm 16, and this is not. I'm not going to find cosmic consciousness with a woman, at 16. I'm just, I'm learning, right? So that's not going to work for me. So I ended up finding this guy named Gurdjieff, and I'm going to talk about him. I'm going to spend a video on him, and he's going to come with a black box warning. I will share that with you. But so he was different in that. He developed what was called the fourth way. Now, he didn't call it that, but he was the way of the faker, the way of the monk, and the way of the yogi. So the faker is a Sufi. So it was basically the pathways that each was taking was for one was mind, one was body, one was soul. And his idea was that if you went down that lane, you would really just kind of be stagnant and siloed. And why not fuse them all together and come up with something different? And he had all these spiritual disciplines. I mean, he's well known. And just to give you an idea that, one thing that really resonated with me was the idea that everyone's an automaton. They're just mechanical. They're just going about as asleep. And so a good metaphor is you could imagine in your mind the Wells Fargo, stagecoach. You have all your horses out there, and imagine these horses are your emotion, your desires, your lust, your needs, your wants. All of these things, and your mind, you've got the reins. You're sitting up on the high seat there. You're in control, right? Your mind, your ego, you're in control of all this. And when you go through town, you slow down and yes, ma'am, what's going on? You got the horses, taking a small little walk. You got them in control. But the moment you leave it town and no one's looking, it's like, giddy up, cowboy, let's go. And so these are your emotions, and this is how people live. And so the idea is, have you ever gotten off the high horse? Literally, literally just stop the horses, man. Stop all the emotions, stop everything, and let go of the reins. Get out of the high horse seat and get grounded. Get on the ground and get in the dirt, as we're getting humble, and open the carriage door. And who's in there but the passenger, your eye, your spirit. And so I guess the question is, and I'll pose to you, and I posed to me, and it was profound. Is where does your spirit want to go? Where does the true self want to go? Do you know the destination, or are you just following your desires, lusts, and so forth? And then the second thing is what language does the spirit speak, right? So there's a difference. It's like when you say, I can't stand myself. There's it's different. So that got me going down that path, and I was practicing these spiritual disciplines daily for weeks, months, and at the time I was living with two guys. They were from the Getty family. Their father had married into the Getty family, and it was pretty clear that he got kicked to the curb because he seemed like an alcoholic to me. And they were just two of the smartest guys that I'd ever met. They, of course, had the best schools, and they were about 12, 13, or 14, I think, is when they left, and I got to know them well, living in this apartment complex in Sherman Oaks. It's funny, there's so many people at that apartment complex. Woody from the Gap Band was there. I hung out with him and actually wrote him a song. That's a different story, but he didn't like it. He thought it was too much. Too sexy, I think is what he said. So I was like, hey man, it was the 80s. But as I'm living with Mark and Mike, I had a breakthrough on these spiritual practices, and after trying the same process for, like I said, weeks, and a really profound moment happened. The best I could describe it is, if you've ever seen Stranger Things, and Eleven is put in the tank, and she has an experience, and she comes out in that dark, wet. It's like a celestial. It's a different realm. It was exactly like that. Which actually, I'll give you the details of that when we go over that. But that is a good segue for the next person, who is John C. Lilly, and this is where it gets. It's almost hard to believe. Again, some of this stuff is hard for me to process, but I had met the most stunning woman when I was out there, and she was living in Malibu. We got to be good friends, and she was a little older than me. I think at this time I was 18, and we would talk at night, and she lived right there on a beautiful house on the beach. We'd hang out and look at the stars, and we would get in these very deep conversations. And she told me that she was a member of a couple groups in Laurel Canyon, and I learned years later what that could possibly mean. She also said she was an assistant to a gentleman that she worked with in there in Malibu, and of course everyone had assistants, it seemed like. So I didn't really ask much about that. I was just happy to be with her. So, but we were talking about things that were, most people just, don't typically talk about. And so one day she says to me, I was talking to you about the guy I work with, and so he was wondering if we could tape our conversations, cassette tape. And I said, yeah, sure, I don't care. Yeah. So we taped hours of conversation, and we should put them in a little cassette deck, and we just talk away. And I didn't think anything of it. About 6 weeks or so later, she says, that guy I told you that I work for, he listened to your tapes, and he wants to talk to you. And I'm like, sure. I mean, it was a passion of mine. I love talking about that. I mean, very few people want to talk about those kind of things. So, I was on a quest for 2 years, and I was all in. And I had some success in some things, and so I went and met him, and it was like an older man. And he was sitting out on a lawn chair out front in the grass. It was overlooking the ocean. It was a older 1-bedroom home, and he was kind of eccentric looking. He was I'll never forget, he was in a one-piece seersucker jumpsuit, which was odd, but hey, he's an older guy, and who am I to judge, right? So we start talking, and I don't know who he is, man. He tells me he's John Lilly. Okay, Dr. John Lilly. All right, nice to meet you. I'm 18 years old, and we talked for like 4 hours. I mean, we talked about things that some things I don't even think I could share. I just don't think people would believe it if you know anything about John Lilly. I know he's one of Joe Rogan's heroes. Here's a clip.
John Lilly, who is one of my personal heroes. He's the creator of the flotation tank.
He says, he was really impressed. And so when we go over that video, I'll go over some of those things we talk about. But he says, I would like for you to meet somebody. And I said, sure. And so this guy is billionaire funder that was living in the Chateau Vermont. And it's a very famous Hollywood hotel. It's pretty much, if you want to be seen, you go to the Beverly Hills Hotel. If you don't, you go to the Vermont. And there's a lot of weird things on the chateau. And of course, that's where John Belushi passed away. I think it was Kathy Smith gave him a shot in an 8-ball in bungalow number 3. And it just so happened that in 1985, I meet this guy. He's got he says it. We'll get to that story. But he's renting both. He's lived there for 6 months in bungalow number 3 and bungalow number 4, and they weren't cheap, and overlooked the Rainbow Room right below, and so that's the question mark on the slide. I don't know who he was, and that experience was it changed me and put me in a whole different state of mind. This is a teaser. He chased me out of there with a 45, and my car wouldn't start, and I had to bump start it, and the security guards there, and begging them not to. I mean, it's a story. You don't want to miss that one. Eccentric doesn't even begin to explain this guy. So that was interesting to say the very least. And then the last on this slide is Joseph Campbell. He really doesn't need an introduction. Obviously, he was a writer, author, prolific. He worked with George Lucas on Star Wars. He's the author of Man with a Thousand Faces, the hero. Man with a Thousand Faces, the hero of myth. He did this great work with Bill Moyers. It was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. But if you read his writings, I learned a lot from him, and we'll go over that. I don't want to spend too much time. This is getting kind of long. And then next up, we do the slide is Miyamoto Musashi. I can't tell you how much this guy influenced me. I read everything he wrote. Book of Five Rings, of course, a story. And if you don't know him, he's one of the greatest warriors of all time and developed the art of fighting with 2 swords. But it's really who he was as a human being. That he said he searched his whole life to find an authentic human being, and he never found one. So he was always on that quest. Great adventure stories, just a great. But his book of Five Rings is, I think, is required reading for all businessmen in Japan. And so That was his book. His section on emptiness is really where that got me. And he's fun to read. And then the next character here, I don't think needs introduction other than the fact that guy's the wickedest man that's probably ever lived. But I got a lot of bad vibrations from him. But what I learned from the billionaire guy set me on a quest to find about music. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that John Lilly was very much into frequencies. If you know anything about him, the movie Altered States was based on his work. He spent 5 years working with a National Institute of Health on what happens inside a human mind. He wrote Metaprogramming in the Biocomputer. He wrote Center of the Cyclone. Matter of fact, that day when we said goodbye, and I was going to meet this billionaire guy, he handed me a signed copy of the book The Scientist, and that was the first time I realized, this guy's an author. It took me, I had to read it and find out who this guy was, and realize here I am talking one of the greatest mind scientists that ever lived. It was interesting to say the least. But the point is that we were talking a lot about frequencies, and a lot of this will make sense when we go over that. And water and my exploration into he developed I know Joe Rogan has what they're called isolation tanks, and there's a reason why he got into that. John Lee, then we talked a lot about that, because my experience, he didn't call them isolation tanks, he called them doorways. But the point is that the guy that asked some information of me in the chateau, it had to do with music and frequencies, and I think that the Ten Seraph and the Kabbalah, and so that led me to read this guy, and I just didn't like what I was reading, to be honest. But I learned a lot about music and him, so that really is going to be more about music and his influence. And if you don't know about that, you will, and you should. He's probably the greatest influence on most of rock and roll. Then the next, just almost done here, Alan Fisher. Alan Fisher is a 26-time world champion. This man, he changed my life. He was living at the apartment complex, and he's the only one. As a matter of fact, I reached out to him just recently, and he got back with me. And he was working for a band named California. They were an amazing band, and they were going to play the Whiskey a Go Go, or not the Whiskey a Go Go, the whiskey, and or maybe it was the Whiskey a Go Go. It's the Whiskey. It's a very famous place in Sunset Boulevard, and they needed. I had a truck, a big 3/4 ton truck, and one of the groupies came down and was asking me to if they could use my truck to take the gear down there, and I didn't like how he was talking to me. Anyway, we ended up in a fight in the lobby, and I was in the best shape of my life. I mean, here, I'll share a few pictures here of the time I was, climbing Mount Baldy in this period here, and this next one I'm hanging off a cliff that's like 400 feet. I'm just being stupid, I guess, and on that tree. But the point is, I was in great shape, and I was always in for adventure, and I didn't really have a lot of fear. So the guy came at me wrong, and we ended up fighting, and I was holding him up against the wall, and I guess that garnered a little respect. I guess sometimes you need to fight someone to gain the respect, and so he said, well, just meet the band. So went upstairs and met the band, and they were phenomenal. I listened to their stuff, and they were kind of like the Eagles, but a little bit more edge, and unfortunately it was Flock of Seagull time. It was new wave. That was the thing, this hairdo, and they just weren't. It just didn't fit the sound that they were looking for, which was really too bad. They really did have a good sound, but anyway, so we're partying. I mean, it's just a big party up there, and I meet Alan, and Alan's got this big scraggly beard, and he's got long hair, and he's partying. We ended up out on the balcony, and we start talking, and I start telling about all my spiritual experiences and what I'm searching and all these things, Eastern this, Eastern that, and Gurdjieff and yada yada yada. And he's like biting his tongue, man. I know he wants to say something. He's like, So I don't think much of it. Next day I see him, and he shaved his beard. He cut off, he got his hair cut, and he was a whole different human being. I mean, he says, listen, our talk last night really put me under a lot of conviction. And we became really good friends. I mean, I went to, I was hanging out with him all the time. He had this a group that he was always working out, because he was clearly, he was on ESPN and doing all these arm wrestling tournaments, and I even went to one with him, and I think it was Reno or Vegas. We went together and rooted on, and I think he won. Somewhere I think I got to hear it. They'll show it up. He's considered America's best arm wrestler ever. But back to the point. So he starts witnessing to me, man. He starts telling me about Jesus Christ, and I'm just like, he's it's kind of like Buddha, he was a good, he's a good guy, historically, he's, I just don't really know much about him, right? Other than that, what I hear, what I've learned, and then it certainly wasn't from a church, and I just thought he was just a, kind of a prophet, right up along all the others, and so he would preach to me and witness to me, and I remember going up to In-N-Out Burger, and he'd have me a track. He said, "Give it to that lady." I was like, how do you tell this guy no? It felt really weird though. I just did. I just wasn't in that lane, and so. But he was persistent, man. He was very persistent, and I remember one time he said, "It's why don't you come to church with me?" He was always asking me to go to church to him, and I just didn't want to. It just wasn't my thing. I really thought I was on the right wavelength, and it was like Easter or something. He said, "Come on, man, it's just the one time of the year." And so I said, "Okay, for you, I'll go." And I went, and I got to tell you, I learned a lot. I took that with a grain of salt, and I walked out, and I held on to it. But we'll talk more about Alan. He's a great guy, and you just I can't say enough about him. He changed my world forever, for the good, because of what happened next. So the next video I want to do is at the end of all these is about this time. I am in Washougal, Washington. It's up there by the Columbia River Gorge, and I'm 7 miles in down Washougal. I'm surrounded in this beautiful forest. It's these huge pine trees and fir trees, and we got a blizzard in. It was an ice storm for 7 days, and I remember hearing the widowmakers. That's what they called these big branches that would get so much snow on them. They're like over 100 feet tall, and they would crack these huge branches, and they were by the weight of the snow and the ice, and it would crash, and they would call widowmakers, because if anyone got hit by one of them, they would certainly die. So I'm bored out of my mind. It's 7 days. I'm sitting in this house and locked in, and Christmas Eve, and I'm looking. And I'm at my father's place, and I'm looking at a whole bunch of books. My father was he was an interesting guy. He got a perfect score on his military entrance exam, and he was one of 5 guys that they wanted to bring in the computer age, but he didn't want to go run that route, because he said all of them had those pen protectors or whatever, and he said they were just all nerds. He didn't want to hang with them, so he went nuclear, biological, chemical on NBC. He became a chemical engineer, and got into silver and gold refining and stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is he was a really smart guy. He was beyond Mensa. Omni had a test that you had a month to try to pass, and he passed it. It was like beyond Mensa. The point I'm trying to make is that he was a smart guy, and he had a lot of books. Always had a lot of books. I hated moving, because it was like literally a garage filled with books, and it was like the worst thing. It was. So I'm sitting here at this. It's about 9 o'clock at night. It's Christmas Eve, and I look, and there's all these books in the library. And as I look, there's a book on black magic, And as I was going through my searching, I'm learning that there's no difference between white and black. It's just one's faster than the other. I mean, we can go into that, and when we go to Alistair, but it was Christmas Eve, so I see a Bible there, and I was always telling Alan that I think I know who it is. He said, "Well, have you read it? Have you actually read it?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And I had to ask myself why I had such bias for Jesus Christ in the Bible. Why was where was all this angst coming from? So I said, all right, so I'll read it. And so to bring us to a close, I read that night Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and when I got to John 8, the answer of who Jesus Christ was answered for me, and that changed my life forever. And that would start Act 2 of my life, of the arc, and that's a whole different thing, and that's kind of where I would like to go at some point in this channel. But as promised, we're gonna go over all these 12, and like I said, some of the stories are gonna be they're gonna be you'll never have heard them before, and some are so unbelievable. I sometimes, like I said, it's hard for me to process, but we're gonna share them. And with that, I'm going to leave you with one final slide. I'm going to ask that ring the bell and subscribe, all that jazz. I'm new to this. Clearly, I'll try to get all this better as I go. But I'm going to leave you with one last slide, because these are 4 videos that I'd like to go over at some point during this channel. And with that, I'm going to hope that you come back and see me for the next one. We'll talk about Charlie and Malibu and some of those stories. And I'm going to leave you with a slide for a few minutes. You can look it over and know that if that's something you would like for me to go into, just leave some feedback. If you got any questions, I'll try to read as much as I can. But with that, I bid you adieu.